Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the invisible forces that are constantly shaping our decisions, often without us even realizing it.
Okay, so picture this. You're watching a stage magician. Someone from the audience writes a secret question, seals it in an envelope. The magician, without ever touching it, just writes down an answer. And when they're both read out loud, it's a perfect match. Impossibly correct. Master mentalist Theodore Anneman called this finding a direct answer to the question. And honestly, it feels like nothing short of a miracle.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are these kinds of abilities some sort of supernatural power given to a select few? Or are they something else entirely? A set of very real, learnable skills that anyone can actually understand.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Because here's the secret. When you pull back that curtain, you find that the very same core principles are at work in some of the most demanding professions on Earth. The Mentalist's Toolkit? It's shared by Navy SEAL commanders, high-stakes negotiators, and the world's most effective communicators.
All right, so let's dive in. We're going to start by asking if it's mind reading or just method. Then we'll break down 3 core principles: channeling attention, building a foundation of trust, and framing the story. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at what we call the influencer's compass.
So our first principle is all about directing focus. You know that old saying, where you look is where you go? That's basically it. What we pay attention to fundamentally shapes our reality.
The psychologist Robert Cialdini has a great term for this. He calls it, what's focal is causal. It's essentially a mental shortcut. Whatever is holding our focus at any given moment automatically gains importance in our minds. And we instinctively assume it's the cause of whatever happens next.
Let's see how this works in practice. Going back to Anneman's magic book, there's this great trick. The performer gets the audience completely absorbed in these fascinating stories about Houdini. But, buried in all that chatter, he casually drops a string of numbers. The audience just filters it out, but the last number he says? That's a secret code to his assistant telling them the exact location of a hidden key. See? Everyone's attention is sent one way, while the real influence happens somewhere else entirely.
And once you know what to look for, you start seeing this principle everywhere. A magician subtly places a pen near a card to guide your choice. Cialdini points out how media coverage can shape public opinion just by focusing our attention on the day-to-day experiences of soldiers instead of the broader strategy of a war. And you know, we can even use this on ourselves. In a heated conversation, if you just pause and ask, what do I really want here? You can channel your own attention toward a much more productive outcome.
But here's the thing, directing attention is a powerful tactic for sure. But to have real, sustainable influence, you need something much deeper. And that brings us right to our second principle, building a solid foundation of trust.
In the book Crucial Conversations, they call this mutual purpose. And it is the absolute entry requirement for any real dialogue. I mean, think about it. If people don't believe that you genuinely care about their goals and interests, they just shut down. That feeling of safety and shared purpose vanishes, and influence becomes totally impossible.
Persuasion expert Joe Vitale puts it another way. He says that truly hypnotic writing, the kind that really connects with people, has nothing to do with your ego. It's all about getting into the reader's ego. It's about getting inside their head and answering that one unspoken question that everyone has. What's in it for me? That kind of empathy is what really builds trust.
And you see this play out in completely different fields. Cialdini tells this story about a top salesman who would forget his briefcase. Why? So the prospect had to let him back in. It's a small act, but it creates a nonverbal connection that says, I'm trustworthy, like a friend. Now, on the flip side, for a Navy SEAL leader, trust is not a tactic, it has to be completely authentic. As they explain in Extreme Ownership, that leader must first be a true believer in the mission. Only then can they build the absolute, unwavering trust their team needs to survive.
Okay, so once you have someone's attention and you've earned their trust, there's one final piece to the puzzle, and that's the story you tell. Because facts on their own are often just inert. Their real power comes from the narrative frame that we build around them. Now, framing isn't about deception. Not at all. It's the art of translating cold, hard facts into a story that actually connects with human emotion.
A really effective frame doesn't change the facts one bit, but it absolutely directs how we interpret them and what we feel motivated to do about them.
There's a chilling example in Cialdini's influence that shows just how powerful framing can be. Powerful enough to reframe someone's entire identity. Captors would start by asking American POWs to make very small, seemingly harmless anti-American statements. Then they'd get them to write those statements down, which makes the commitment active. And slowly, over time, through public readings and essays, the prisoners began to subconsciously align their own self-image with their actions. They had effectively reframed their own story.
And the thing is, we do this to ourselves all the time. The authors of Crucial Conversations call these clever stories, the excuses we tell ourselves. The stories where we're the innocent victim, they're the evil villain, or we're just completely helpless. The key to making progress is learning to spot these unproductive stories and consciously reframe them into productive ones that are all about taking ownership and finding solutions.
This idea right here is the absolute foundation of extreme ownership. It says that a leader's main job is to master the productive frame. Good leaders don't make excuses. They reject the victim's story no matter what goes wrong. Instead, they take full ownership, and they frame every single setback as a challenge to overcome and an opportunity for the team to win.
So we have these three powerful principles: channeling attention, building trust, and framing stories. But this brings us to what might be the most critical question of all. When you have this kind of power, what's your responsibility?
Look, these principles are neutral tools. Just like a hammer can be used to build a house or break a window, the entire difference comes down to intent. Are you trying to coerce someone into a win-lose outcome just for your own benefit? Well, that's manipulation. Or are you working to find a win-win solution that's built on dialogue and mutual respect? That is ethical influence.
50%. Let that number sink in for a moment. It's a pretty startling finding from Cialdini's research. Nearly half of all senior leaders feel that to succeed, they sometimes have to be dishonest. But here's the deep irony. That very same behavior is proven to absolutely destroy the morale, performance, and trust that are required for any kind of long-term success.
So, the invisible blueprint of influence, it's not so invisible to you anymore. These principles are at play everywhere, from the stage to the battlefield to your next crucial conversation. They're a fundamental part of human psychology. Understanding them gives you a new awareness, and with that awareness comes a choice. You have the blueprint now. The only question left is, what are you going to build with?